In this video, I'm going to be going over how I did my fuel lines on my MKIV Supra TT. But before I dive into that, let me just give you a little update of what I've been working on. So I originally started off as a T56 Magnum F swap project. I had the T56 Magnum, the normal one, in there. And I put a fueler on Facebook Marketplace. And I said, hey, if anyone wants to buy this, I'll pull it, I'll sell it, and I'll buy the Magnum F. I wanted to get rid of the Sickie setup, and I didn't know if I'd find anyone, but it didn't take that long, and someone with a Mark III Supra said they wanted it. Apparently the Mark III Supra, the regular Magnum, fits perfectly. It's what they need. So if you have the regular Magnum and if you want the Magnum F for your Mark IV Supra, find someone with a Mark III Supra. Shifts great, it's awesome. While I had it out, I decided to tackle some oil leaks that I had. My rear main seal was leaking a little, my front main seal, I had a cam seal leaking, valve cover leak, an oil return leak, and some other stuff. Basically, I'd have oil kind of drip down here, pool, and drip on the ground. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna fix all of that. Since I have the valve covers off and I need to undo the timing to do the cam seal, I'm going to do new timing belt stuff. I did the ARP 625 head studs. I did new valve stem seals while I was in there. And I've put everything back together, and I've got no leaks. I did the indexing on the bell housing. I never did that with the original T56 Magnum. It wasn't really described, or Joel never really mentioned it in his early swap videos that I followed. But now it's something they do. I got my indexing pretty much perfect. This trans just slid right on. But while I was under here working on it, I kept smelling fuel. I'm like, where is that coming from? Like, I thought I had some kind of leak. And it turns out it was my AN line. So this is just rubber AN line. It's probably pretty old, maybe it's probably 15 years old, honestly. And I put my nose right up to it, and sure enough, it reeked of fuel. So apparently that's the thing with this rubber AN line. It doesn't leak, doesn't drip or anything like that, but it allows fuel vapor to escape. And my car has 2 Supra fuel pumps in the tank, and I use the stock card line, and you can see that's the stock card line. So it comes out of the fuel tank with a banjo bolt. It'd go through this line. There'd be a fitting here. It'd go up the start hard line. Then right here, it'd go to the fuel filter. And you can see that somebody had completely stripped the head of this flare nut. And then there's a special adapter here that would give it to 6AN. And this would go to the rear of my fuel rail. And then I had a second pump in the tank with an AN fitting on the top, and there's this really long AN hose. You can see I cut it right there. This really long AN hose that went all the way up to this no-name brand filter, and then this went to the front of the fuel rail, and then in the center of the fuel rail is where the return would go. So I had a lot of AN line in there, and it would smell pretty bad of fuel. So I did some research. There are some AN lines that have like a Viton inner seal. I think Racetronix is one. I think Earl makes some. And I was reading reviews on it, and I found some people that said it's fine with like E85, but one person said he still runs pump, and he swapped out all his lines, and he's like, you know what, it still kind of smells. So the only real true way around that is to go with PTFE line. And PTFE is a little different. I'd never used it before, but it's basically this Teflon line, and you can see it's got the same kind of stainless braiding on it. And instead of a 2-piece fitting like a typical AN line, it's a 3-piece fitting. The fittings look exactly the same, but you have kind of your collar. You've got this little guy right here, which I think they call an olive, and then this is the other end. And basically you cut it like you would AN line. Some people use clippers. for it, I just use a little cutoff wheel. You'd tape it up, you'd cut it, you'd deburr any kind of burrs on this inner Teflon. You'd slide this on, then you'd put the olive around the inner part right here. You'd push it in so that the olive is flush with the surface. You'd stick this in the center of the hose. Very important, the next step is you'd want to lube it with some oil. You'd put some oil right here. You'd put some oil on the threads. If you don't lube it, it is too much friction, and you're going to end up ruining your fittings trying to tighten it. I did some test ones, and I'd have to put so much force on them, I'd end up stripping stuff. But once I put some oil on it, I made nice clean connections. And these fittings I got, there's a bunch of suppliers that sell them, but this all came from Racetronix. So I bought their flare wrenches and everything. They had 10% off on Labor Day, and I bought all these fittings, and I made my own line. And you can see this is the old AN line, and this is the new stuff. So it's a lot smaller because you don't have that thickness of rubber. It is pretty flexible, but it's not as flexible as the rubber. So it can't make as tight a turns. You gotta kind of stretch it out and make wider turns if you can. You can't follow the exact path of the OEM fuel line the whole way. There's too many tight turns for that. But it's around $4 a foot, and they do have some other stuff that is coated, so it's got like a PVC jacket on it. Some other PTFE line has the nylon braid. I chose just to do the raw like I had it before. That kept it a lot skinnier. And I have a friend that road races over in the UK, and he used to have a line like this, and he switched it out to the PVC stuff, and he's crazy into it. He monitors even his fuel temperature. And he said, you know what, I did all that coating, and my fuel temperature's a little bit hotter now. So his theory is having the exposed stainless under the car kind of gave it a cooling property as it made its way up to the front. So that's what I did. It was cheaper, and I added some wire loom if there's any spot where I thought it was gonna rub. One other thing with this line, if you look at the inside, you can see that it's black. It's carbon lined, and what that means is that this Racetronix stuff is conductive compared to non-conductive stuff that some manufacturers sell. Like if you look at the line on Summit Racing, you'll see the inside is white or clear, and the difference, it sounds kind of crazy or kind of silly however you look at it, is that when fuel flows through here, there can be a static charge that's built up, and apparently with the non-conductive, there's the risk of that charge arcing over to this stainless outer shell, and that's going to create a pinhole in the Teflon, and then you're going to have a fuel leak. So with the conductive stuff like this, the static charge would be able to flow through this layer of carbon and over into the end of the AN fitting over here and ground out. You won't have the risk of a pinhole or fuel leak. It's probably pretty rare, but that's the difference between conductive and non-conductive. So that's why I chose to go with this conductive stuff. So I said all this came from Racetronix. I bought their flare wrenches, which I've never had. I've always made do with like an adjustable and some masking tape. And I bought their vice things. These are magnetic. I'm still not sure how I feel about these. I didn't actually use them. You gotta be careful putting this in, because what I find, if you don't have it in the right spot or tucked down too far, it wants to like buckle. It wants to buckle up, or if you have it in this end fitting, it'll be tight here, but then this side will start to slant in. So I didn't use these, but I think I was just using them wrong when I was experimenting with it. When you put the actual fitting in, like you gotta put it pretty much flush and it's less likely to buckle. But these are $11, so they're magnetic, so they're worth buying. The end wrenches were $55. And also get yourself like a nice set of flare wrenches so you don't round nuts like the previous owner did. These are actually some Sunex flare crow wrenches. These are like $25. They're well worth having. So I did all new line, and I'm going to show you basically what it looks like. And my original plan was just to do one PTFE line beside the stock hard line, but I had this stripped flare nut which bugged me. I did buy a new flare nut, and I was going to put this on, and I bought this adapter because I was going to run 2 aftermarket fuel filters. But then I got down here, and I was trying to take it out, and I used flare wrenches here, and this started to loosen up. It backed off like 3 threads, and then it got tight as hell. So something's stripped back here. So I said, you know what? I'm going to run PTFE line for both fuel pumps. That way it's the same. It'll be easier to not deal with the hard line and then have to go through a few different adapters to get it to the fuel filters, because you'd have the banjo bolt, you'd have one connection here, you'd have 2 connections here, then you'd have a 3rd connection from here to go to the fuel filter. So what I did is just 2 PTFE lines, and it's a little tricky to see, but they come right out here, and you can see I've got some wire loom on them. This is high heat stuff, and that's just for extra protection. And it goes up over the subframe, comes down the other side, and then right here it goes under the factory covers. So my gas tank just vents right to the atmosphere. There was a line that went all the way up to the front, and it was venting underneath the engine, and I took all that out, and I was able to get both lines to run in the factory channel. So all of those little clips have these lines in them, and then they come out right here, and they go to my 2 fuel filters. And these are fuellab. They've got 6 AN on each side. So there's a 45 fitting here, a 45 fitting here. I made that bracket that's holding them up there. See if I can get a better picture of it. It's just like a 90-degree bracket, and I didn't have to drill any holes or anything like that in the car. There's actually some OEM nuts that are on this part of the body, and there's a little bit of thread sticking out. And if you pull the carpet back, those bolts that are sticking out are for the little sensor that's under the gas pedal. So I took 2 of the bolts out, and I put in longer bolts so that the threads would stick out further. And then I was able to drill a hole in the aluminum bracket that I made, and then use a nut to mount the bracket up there. And then I tapped and threaded for the fuellab mounts. And these come with both filters. So 6 AN in, 6 AN out, and then that goes up to the fuel rail. I'll lower the car in a minute and show you that. I said that this line snapped right into the factory channel. It did. It took a little bit of work. So this is what it looks like. This is what's underneath that cover. So right here is where your fuel vapor line that goes to your charcoal canister normally is. And then right here is where your stock fuel feed is. And you can see in between there's a little separator. So what I did is I removed this bolt, and that allowed me to pull down on it a little. And then I took a hacksaw blade, just the blade in my hand, and I put it up there, and I was able to cut the centerpiece out. And then both line would kind of fit in there, but it was kind of too snug. So I took a heat gun and I heat up. I made this side really warm so that I could bend it out a little, and then both lines would fit. And there's actually some little tabs in there too that snap around the line. I took a pair of pliers and I broke those off. So it had plenty of room for both of these stainless lines. If you did the PVC coating or nylon coating, there may not be enough room, I don't know. but for my application it worked fine. I had to notch out a little spot here because the line wouldn't bend up high enough. It was too much stress on it, but it's still well protected and well up into the car where nothing is going to hit. Same with the front. The subframe is way below up here. I am going to have to do something with this ground cable because I don't have the factory fuel filter there that it bolted to. It's too short. I may have to move it up there or just make a new ground wire, which I may do. So let me lower this and I'll show you what it looks like from the top. You get a good look at my CCWs. Let's go around to the back side first. So this is the stock fuel pump housing, and this was that 90-degree AN fitting that was installed by a previous owner. So this is that PTFE line, and I put a 90 here. The original rubber line kind of bent in and went around, but I couldn't do the same because this line doesn't bend as much, so you have to kind of make some of the tighter turns with fittings. So it's just a 90 there, and then right here is a straight. I had to cut that little tab. This is the factory banjo bolt, and this is an aftermarket banjo bolt to 6AN adapter. And there's a few different brands. I bought one that's blue and aluminum, and I bought this one which is steel. I don't know if it was made, I think it may have been made by like Mamba. It was off eBay. It was around $15, and I like it because it's steel. And I did measurements. I measured the factory the factory line to see how big the opening was in the center, how big the opening was here, how thick it was, and it's pretty much exactly like the factory one. And I'm using the factory banjo bolt just because the opening in the factory banjo bolt was a tad bigger than the bolt that came with it. So that fits cleanly. This is my vent line, and if you use thicker AN line, like I don't know how you would even feed it through there. There's not a lot of opening. I did have to bend this up some, but I didn't need to cut anything. My cover still fits. So that's pretty clean. That's what I'm going to go with for back here. And let me show you the front. So the front, one line just comes up the firewall. You can't see it because I've got some more of that coating on it. I didn't want it to rub on any of the factory brake lines, and it goes to the back of my fuel rail right there. That's the 90-degree fitting. And then in the front, there's the fitting for the front fuel rail, and that's 120 degrees in the front. I did have a 90 there, but 120 works better. It kind of points the line going backwards, and it just runs along here. And I'm going to zip tie it to this wire harness over here, and it's several inches away from the steering column. And then I have another little section of line that goes from the middle of the fuel rail, and it just loops down to the regulator, and each end of that line has a 90-degree fitting on it. So the fittings are, I think, $15 for anyone that's got a bend in the straight, so like 7. But there it is. It starts. I don't smell any fuel when I smell the line. It's PTFE coated, the Teflon, so it's E85 compatible. Here's another look at another thing I did was the catch can setup. I had a theory that maybe some of my oil leaks were because I wasn't venting enough. So that's the Freed Engineering catch can. But it should be good. I don't have any oil leaks anymore. I won't have the fuel smell, and everything seems like it's got to work well.